Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today, Masechtas Menachos daf Chav Gimel. We are going to begin on Chav Gimel Amud Aleph, the third line from the top. Itmar. Kaimitz de Minchas Chayte. When it comes to the Kamitza, taken from a Minchas Chayte, Shishamanoi, and there was oil on it. Now, that doesn't seem to be too problematic. After all, most of the time when we hear about a mincha, it requires oil. But of course, that is not true when it comes to a minchas chayte. When it comes to a minchas chayte, there's not supposed to be any oil at all. So as Rashi says, shenasan alav shemen le'achar shekamtzoi. So after you already did the kamitza, you added oil. So Rav Yochanan Omer Pastor, Shalkash Omer, Hu atzmo mishi kishkishu bishirai halug umalehu. So it says that in itself, if you it becomes moist, and you could have the leftover from the another mincha, and it's fine. Says Rashi, Kaloimer tchilas mitzvah. The beginning of the mitzvah of the mincha is at the time when it becomes moist. B'shirei mincha echad min halugin v'kol shechein de'im shemanu kosher. So basically, it's telling us that there's nothing wrong if it was already after the kamitza, according to him, to have oil. The whole problem is that there shouldn't be any oil on it at the onset before the kamitza. So what is he talking about? We know that's not true because it says you're never supposed to have frankincense or oil on a minchas chayte. So how could it be that Reish Lakish could have Yochanan? So he says, yes, of course the pasuk says that by minchas chayte, but that pasuk excluding oil is shol yikva shemen kechavrisaha, that it should not be just like its counterparts. In other words, that it doesn't mean that you can never have oil on it after the kamitza was done to be able to have some moisture, but it just means that you cannot have it on in the normal situation. Says Rashi, only at the time before kamitza. That's what it means. Before kamitza, don't have the oil. But after you already did the kamitza, if you add a little bit of oil to it to have a little bit of moisture, then that's perfectly fine. Okay, so again, this is a machlok. So Rav Yochanan Reish Lakish. So Rav Yochanan asks a kasha and Reish Lakish, how could you tell me that if you have oil even after the kamitza of the minchas chayte, then it's okay? But we learn like this: when it comes to chayav shisar bebol, let's say you have a mincha which is char, which is dry, that it commingled with a mincha which is mixed, which means it's something which has oils and things in it. So yakriv, so the din is you could be makriv it. Rabbi Yehuda Omer lo yakriv. Rabbi Yehuda says no, you're not allowed to be makriv. Now Rashi says feel rabbanan lo amri yekrav, even though it is true that the Chachamim do say you could be makriv this mixture, is elamishim de oilin in mavatlan zetzeh. It's only based on what we saw in yesterday's daf that there's a concept that when things are put already on the mizbeach, then they're not mavatal one another. So therefore, even though it's true that they're mixed together in a practical sense, but halachically it's keilu, like it's not mixed, and therefore they're considered separate. The heichad isa a minchas nadava shadin lay. Aval im nafal shemen bekaimitz the chayte fil rabban lo yikrav. But that doesn't mean that if oil would have fallen onto the onto this minchas chayte, that you would be able to be makriv it. No, right? In other words, we're talking only a situation because because oil in mavatlan zed. However, and that's only by minchas nadava, but not in a situation over here. Well, chayr, even they would say it's not. You can't be makriv. My love, kaimitz the minchas chayte. We're talking about the kaimitz. Why is it dry? it's referring to, because again, it means there's no oil on it. So what mincha doesn't have oil, that's a minchas chayte. So we're probably talking about a case of a minchas chayte, the arab bekaimitz, the minchas nadava. And these two are mixed up, and therefore we see it doesn't work. It's only in a situation where you have, again, this notion of ein oil and ein mevatlan zedze. However, if we're talking about a minchas chayte, it was mixed up with the kaimitz of a minchas nadava, it would not be good. Lo, minchas parim ve'elim be'minchas kvasim. We're actually referring to different mincha offerings, the minchas parim ve'elim, that got mixed up with the minchas kvasim. Says Rashi, which when it comes to the minchas nechasim shel parim ve'elim, chariva, that's considered to be dry with gabi minchas nesachim, compared to the mincha of nesachim, the keves havi shloish lugim le'isarein, because even though it's not that it's completely dry, but in comparison to the other one, it is, because when it comes to the keves, we have 3 lugin to an isaron, which is more oil. The chsib b'parshas shalach hacha, it says soisiron b'ul b'revish hahin shemen v'hin shnayim eser lugin. However, shel parim be'elim shnei lugin li'isaron, so it has less oil, has 2 lugin to an isaron. So skipping a few lines into the Rashi, so hasam vadai liyikrav. Over there, you can't be mark of it. Mishum de nimsas ha'ava raka, because you're making the thicker one thinner, and vice versa. Aval kaimitz the minchas chayte, the ira bekaimitz the minchas nadava yakriv. However, our situation, Reish Lakish said you could be mark of that. 1 second. You want to tell me that it's talking about a case of minchas parim ve'elim, which is mixed up with minchas kavasim, which again, one has 3 lugin to isaron, one has 2 lugin to isaron. We already learned that explicitly. It says minchas parim ve'elim b'minchas kavasim. It already says that explicitly. The charav, and a case of a dry mincha shesar b'bol yikrav Rabbi Yehuda Omer liyakriv. So perushika mafarish law, as a lot of times the Gemara says, it's just coming to explain it. And therefore Rashi says, Yafil hachil rabbanon yikrav dein oilin mevatlan zedze. So he says that according to the Rabban, you could because ein oilin mevatlan zedze. Okay. So boy Rava. So with that, again, it's just a machlokas, and we don't really have a tiyufta on that side. So now Rav asks a question. Kaimitz shemitza shmano el gabe eitzim mahu. Let's say when it comes to a kaimitz, in which the it's dripping its oil onto the wood, and you put the kaimitz on it. Says Rashi mahu. Mi havi chaser kaimitz, is it considered to be missing? Olo. Mi amrinan chaburi oilin mashu machaber Hashem and lekaimitz shechayv v'nois and lekaimitz al ha'etzim. And therefore we say, as let's look in the Gemara, mahu chaburi oilin ka'oilin damu. Do we say that's what's attached is considered like the thing itself? And says Rashi, kil havi Hashem and muvul b'kaimitz. Even though the oil taka dropped into the wood, we'll say that it's ki'ilu, like it was in the kaimitz, and therefore it wasn't chas or anything, therefore it's kosher. Or do we say lav ka'ilun uposel? So that's a kasha. So Omer le Ravino Ravashi lav hainu Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish l'chayra. That's the same machlokas between Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. What's that? The Idmar Hamala Aver she'en bo kazayis. Let's say a person brings outside, right, like shchute chutz, maybe mala b'chutz, but it's a limb which is not the amount of a kazayas. The etzem and a bone, mashlim oil kazayas, but a bone, which obviously then itself is not something which is consumed, that would even up to get to the level of a kazayas. So is that already enough that you're chayiv for mal b'chutz? So Rav Yochanan Omer Chayiv, Reish Lakish Omer Potter. Rav Yochanan Omer Chayiv. Why? How does that equal a kazayas? Because chaburi oil and ka'oil and damu. Even though the truth is we're looking at basar and not the etzem, so what if we're really burning the basar? But the etzem, which is attached to the basar, is able to mashlim it to the level of a kazayas. Reish Lakish and Rapata Chabri Oilin Lavka Oilin Damu. That's the reason why you're potter. So the kasha is, it's not a kasha necessarily, but like, why are we posing this as a kasha, as like a separate kasha? We should deduce it that's the same concept as the Machlokas Reish Lakish Rabbi Yochanan, the case of a person who has the oil dripping on the eitzim, whether or not that oil is considered to be connected. According to Rabbi Yochanan, it would be, and therefore would be fine. According to Reish Lakish, it wouldn't be. So the truth is, Tiboyu Rabbi Yochanan and Tiboyu Reish Lakish. It's still a kasha, even according to both shitas. Tiboyu Rabbi Yochanan, because Adkan lo kamer Rabbi Yochanan hasam. The only time he said that the bone is connected to the meat to equal kazayas, el be'etzem, the meat of the basaru, because it's the same min, it's from the same animal. So therefore, it makes sense that maybe we'll connect the basar and the etzem because it's from the same animal. Abahai the lav the min of the kaimitzu. Whoa. Over here, the shemen has now dropped onto the wood, which is not the same thing as a bone to the meat. Odilma fil Reish Lakish lo kaimer ela be'etzem. Maybe Reish Lakish says that it's not attached is only when it comes to a bone. Why? Davar mefarashu. It's something that is removed. V'i parish, and if the bone falls off the mizbeach, says Rashi, could go in poikin la mitzvah haduri, right? There's no mitzvah to return it. So the reality is, it's not something which is significant enough to be able to equal a kazayas. Says Rashi, Loshnachar kaimet shemitza shemano el gabi eitzim. I'll get to that in a second. Abel shemen the lav bar mifarshu. It's not something that was supposed to be removed. Well, odilmo loishna teku. Okay, so in this Rashi brings a loshan acher kaimetz shemitza shemano al gabi eitzim mahu. Right. So it's the same kasha, but he frames it a little bit differently. Mi boy lahakter eitzim im kaimetz olo. Is it necessary to burn the wood together with the kaimetz? Not is the oil just going to be mashlim to be able to make it the right amount of the kaimetz, so it's not chaser, but rather the question is, according to this lashon Rashi, whether or not it's necessary to also be makter the eitzim. Look in question 1. So boy Rabbi kaimetz shemitza shemano el gabi eitzim mahu chaber yoel. Look at this. So lamai nafgimina yichaburi oilin lav ka oilin. So base perushim in Rashi. So one, Perish Rishon in Rashi is, if you hold it's lav ka'oilin, that the oil is not connected anymore to the kemitza because it's now on the wood, and therefore ein chibor bein shemen shebe'etzim l'kaimetz v'havli kaimetz shechaser u'pasul. So the kaimetz is missing. Or according to the second interpretation of Rashi, ilav ka'oilin lo'ichlas lan klal b'chisuro shel shemen v'kaimetz karbel atzmai. So he says, if it's connected, then maybe it has to be burned. If it's a lav ka'oilin, then maybe we're not makbid the fact that it's missing, and you can be makrib the kaimetz by itself. Okay. Okay, let's look at question TA2. Chayerev shenisar b'bol b'hudo aimer lo yakr. Okay. So it says you should not be makrib it. Mahu hachayre b'bol libd Reish Lakish madua ein lo minchas chayte minchas nadava. So, as we saw, that according to the sheet of Reish Lakish, he's talking about a case of minchas pargim v'elim and minchas kvasim, right? So in that situation, that's where he says the din. That's what we're referring to. So just get this down. It says it's minchas pargim ve'elim b'minchas kvasim. So that's what it's referring to. And the reason why he says it that way, because he holds by minchas chayte, ein psul shemen el rak shel yikva shemen kechaber secha. As we said, according to the sheet of Reish Lakish, there's nothing wrong with having oil, provided that it's just not done like the other ones. Namely, that it's allowed to be done, it just has to be only afterwards, right? That's what Rashi says, but oid shlo nikmatza, avol achar kimitza im shemana ksas kosher. But if it was done after the kimitza, then it's okay. Okay, that's question TA2, which I got completely wrong. Okay, let's keep on moving. All right. So let's see the next Mishnah. Shtei menachot. So you have these two mincha offerings. Shlo nikmatzu. However, the kimitza process hasn't taken place yet. However, this arvu, zu b'zu, they got mixed up one to the other. So, what do we do now? Now they're all mixed up. So, im yochel likmoitz mezu mifni atzmo umezu mifni atzmo ikasheris. If you're able to do a kimitza, this one by itself and this one by itself, it's fine. V'yama psulos. But if not, it is puzzle. So each one remains distinct, and clearly we say one, this one is this one and not the other. So if you have the ability to do a kimitza and a kimitza, then it's fine. Even though really they're mixed together, we don't have an issue with it. Kaimitz nisar b'mincha. Let's say you have a kaimitz which was mixed up with a mincha shlo nikmatza. So this is a little bit more problematic, because the first case is that they were both at the same stage. They haven't done kimitza with both of them. Here, kimitza was done with one, and kimitza was not yet done with the other, and now they're mixed together. So now, what do? So lo yaktir. You shouldn't be maktir, even though the kaimitz is ready for the haktaira to burn it, but the other one you didn't do kimitza yet, so it's already mixed in, so you can't do it. However, hiktir, let's say Yutaka did, zusha nikmitz oil balam. Again, we say that they're like separate things, and therefore the one that kimitza was done, we say was oil balam, it's fine. However, zu shel nikmitza, the other one lo oil balam. The other one has not been oil balam because you didn't do kimitza on it, but at least it works for one of them. Okay. Case number 3. Nis'arav kaimtza b'shireha. So over here, you did the kimitza. Now normally you do a kimitza, and then you do haktaira, and then there's shirayim. But what happens if that which you did kimitza fell back in, and now it's mixed in together with the leftovers? O b'shireha shel chaverta. Or for that matter, it fell into shirayim of something else, another mincha, lo yaktir. Again, the leftovers are not allowed to be burned on the mizbech because there's an isser bal taktiru, that once you've already burned some of the kimitza on the mizbech, you can't take any of the shirayim and burn it on the mizbech. It's a lav of bal taktiru. V'im hikter oil balam. So even though you're not supposed to do it, but b'di'evet, if you did, then it's oil balam, fine. Now let's see the Gemara on this. Amar Chisda. Nevela batela b'shchuta. Now, we have two different animals. One is a nevela that wasn't shechted properly, and then you have another behem which is shechted. Now we say that a nevela can be bottled b'shchuta. Says Rashi, Yim yesh shtei chatichos. Let's say you have two pieces, achas shchuta v'achas nevela. One of them is shechted, one is nevela. We don't know which one's which. So batla behen, so it becomes bottle. Shim naga ba'achas mechatichais enotame. Diamrinan shchutahi. So some people, it says over here, shtei chatichais achas. So really the way to read it is without these parentheses, that there's two pieces that were shechted and one which is nevela. So we go basa roiv, and since the roiv is shechted, so even though you touch the piece, we are going to go basa roiv. And even though nevela is matama, but in this situation it's not because it's bottle. Okay, so nevela could be batel b'shchuta. She eshel shchuta shetas nevela, because it's not possible for an behema, which is shechted, to become a nevela. So therefore, it's like the status of min she'eno minoi. Says Rashi, v'hamli min b'she'eno minoi. It's like two separate things. Ubatel l'divrei koil. And therefore, when it comes to things which are two separate things, min she'eno minoi, it could be batel b'roiv. Okay. Fine, because they're considered two separate things. However, an animal which was shechted is not bottle, let's say, together with two pieces of nevela, so that shechted piece is not going to be bottle. It's possible that a nevela could become a shchuta. What does that mean? The lechi misracha doesn't mean you could eat it, but it means that when the non-kosher meat spoils, parcha tumasa, it removes its tuma. So therefore, says Rashi, im yesh shtei chatichos nevela v'achas shchuta b'nam, so you can see it clear the other way around. It's the same thing. It's 2 against 1. Einu b'teila v'im naga achas mehen b'truma. Let's say you touch one of them. Einu nisrefas leha. You don't have to burn it because we're toil. Toil means we don't eat it, we don't burn it, because it may have been the shchuta one. Why? Because they're considered. We don't say it's min she'eno minoi. Says Rashi, yeshul arrive liyos kemuit havi kemin b'she'eno minoi v'lazlin and basar bottle. V'afal gav the asher lemuit liyos kimeruba havi kimin b'she'eno minoi. Okay, so Rav Chanino Eimer kol she'esher liyos kimohu. Anytime it could be. So parcha tuma says Rashi Chesiv leger asher b'sharecha titnena. So what are you supposed to do with this nevela meat? You can't eat it, so you can give it to this person who's in your gates. It means haruya leger kuruya nevela. It's got to be something which is fit to ger. It doesn't mean to a Jewish convert. It means a ger taishav. He's not mechuyev and he's the oichel nevelis. He's allowed to eat nevelis. So that's only considered to be nevela when it's shach to eat it. But if it's inedible, it no longer has the status of nevela, and therefore, because of that, it can, on some level, take upon itself the level of shchuta. So it becomes min b'minoi, and therefore, because of that, it's not going to be batal b'roiv. Anything which is possible to be like it, einu batal. It will not be batal, and therefore it's like min b'minoi. Batal. However, if it's impossible to be like it, then it is batal because they're like two separate things. Fine. So Rashi says hilkach nevela einu batel b'shchuta, but shchuta batel b'nevela. The yavshel shchuta shas nevela. A shchuta can't become nevela. V'im naga achas min hachatichos b'truma nisrefas lehel Rav Chanina ozul baser batal. He says, therefore, if let's say he touches one of these pieces, truma touches one of them, so then taki it's going to be burned. But Rav Chanina says we go baser batal. All right. So let's continue. So Alibidaman. So who is this statement like? Rabbanan is it like the shita Rabbanan ha'amri oilin hu deloy mavatli hadadi. They already established, as we saw already, but we saw again a lot in yesterday's daf, that when it comes to things that are put on the mizbech, they're mavatal one another. So that's true. That's only by oilin. Of a min b'mino batal. They hold that when it's min b'minoi, it is batal. Says Rashi, hilkach bein nevel b'shchuta bein shchuta b'nevel b'teilin. Right? We don't look at what it could be. Right? The reality is that it's min b'minoi. It's the same meat, if you will, and therefore it's going to be batal. Either way, bein nevel b'shchuta bein shchuta nevel, according to the Rabbanan, because the only reason why they'll say it's not batal is because of oilin is not mavatal hadati, but min b'mino is batal. So therefore, it doesn't matter if there's rov shchuta or rov nevela, it's going to be mavatal one another. But Rabbi Huda, according to the sheet of Rabbi Huda, as we continue to Chaf Gimel Amud Beis, Rabbi Huda basar chazusa also. He goes after chazusa, the appearance. What does that mean? we said before, ein dam avatal dam, that if you have one dam, and we saw this by Yom Kippur, the dam soyer and the dam par, which are mixed together, even though dam par is much more than dam soyer, they're not mavatal one another. Or it says over here, zeh kazeh, hakinami ozo basa chazusa, v'hoyel v'shneim min basar, as it says on the side, ein batelim zeh b'zeh. They're both the same min. They should not be mavato one another. Idi min b'minahu. So again, since it's min b'minoi, it's min b'minoi. So therefore, that's what we said. If it's only min she'eno minoi, is it going to be possibly bata b'roiv? But if it's min b'minoi, so it's the same thing. It's not going to be bata b'roiv. So it can't be like him either. Now, libed Rabbi Chia, the Tani Rabbi Chia, nevela v'shchuta b'telos zubazu. If you have a nevela and a shchuta, they can be mevatel one to the other. So Rashi says, Rav Chanina of Rav Chisda b'farshi taima Rabbi Chia. V'hapugid Rav Chisda savar nevela v'shchuta. He says if you have a nevela together with shchuta, Rav Chia v'loy shchuta b'nevela. Rav Chanina b'farsh ivcha. And Rav Chanina actually says it the other way around. Rav Chia libed aman, libed rabbanon ho'amri oilen hu dolo mavatli hadadi. Again, they say that when anything that's put up is not mavatal, mashma ha min b'minu is batal. Libed Rabbi Yehuda kol min b'minoi. He says that when it comes to min b'minu, Rabbi Yehuda lo batal. So oilam libed Rabbi Yehuda mechika Rabbi Yehuda min b'minu lo batal. The only time he says it's not batal is hanimili hecha de efshalei. It's only if it could be like the other one. However, if it cannot be like the other one, then he'll agree that it is batal. So even though it's true, Yehuda sometimes does say, when it comes to min b'minoi, it's not batal, but that's only when it's not shaykh. That it's not batal. That's only when it's possible to be like the other one. However, if it's not possible to be like the other one, then it is batal. The Rav Chisda savar baser mevatel azlina. Rav Chanina savar baser batal azlina. So direction, and the question is, which direction are you going as far as the outlook? Which lens you're looking at it? Do you go baser the batal or the mavatal? Look at question 2. Im nevela batal b'shchuta. Can nevela cause that the shchuta is not there? Oman di'omer min b'minu lo bat. Oman di'omer min b'minoi lo batal. If you hold min b'minu is not batal, right, which is what we mentioned is the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda, so what does he say over here? Because according to Rabbi Yehuda, kol min b'minoi Rabbi Yehuda lo batal. So how do we say it could be like the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda? So he said, because it's all totally on whether or not it's shaykh to be like the other one. So according to Rav Chisda, it's batal. In other words, if you have nevela, it could be batal, like it's not there with the shchuta, which means you have one nevela and two shchuta, right? Which is what we said at the beginning over here. You have one nevela and two shchuta. So the two shchuta is roiv, and therefore it becomes batal. So the question is, how is that the case? It's min b'minoi. So Rav Chisda says it's still batal. Dozo baser mavatal. Kivan den shchuti yachayla shetehei nevela loy havi min b'minoi. So the reality is that a shchuta cannot be like the nevela. So our focus, what is our focus? So our focus is we go after the mavatal. In other words, the thing that is the stronger dominant one. So since a shchuta cannot become a nevela, so therefore it's considered to be not shaykh. So therefore it becomes a status of min she'eno minoi. and therefore it's that's the reason why it is batal. Again, the only reason why we would say min b'mino is not batal is only in a situation where one cannot be like the other, one cannot become the other. So the shchuta cannot become a nevela, so therefore, according to him, it is batal. However, according to Reb Chanina, it's not batal because he goes batal, busser batal, right? So he goes after the nevela, right? He goes after the one nevela, and therefore, since it's possible for nevela to become a shchuta, and once it becomes rotten, right, it's no longer fit to be given to the ger, so therefore it's no longer shaykh to be considered halachic like a nevela. So it's shchuta, not that's really shchuta. It just means that's not matama. So therefore, havile min b'minoi v'lo batal. That's the idea over there. So again, that's the whole question. Are we going at, or what are we looking at? Because nevela can become shchuta, but a shchuta can't become nevela. So therefore, because of that, do we say this din that it can become batal or not? Do we go? Do we say that it is batal? So it's all totally. Are you looking at the nevela? The nevela can become shchuta, and therefore, because of that, it's considered like min b'minoi, and min b'minoi is not batal according to Yehuda. Right. However, if you look at it the other way and look at the shchuta cannot become nevela, so therefore they're two separate things, and therefore it can become batal. All right. Tanan, shtei menachos shel nikmatzu. So our Mishnah said you have two menachos that are on the same level. Right. This is the first case of our Mishnah, where the kamitza was not done for either, but it's arvizu b'zu, and they got mixed up. So you can do kamitza by both of them separately, then fine. Now, once you did kamitza with one of them, the other, or the rest of the flour, it's just all in there. Some of it's shirayim and some of it is this other mincha. So shirayim. So the other one is shirayim. V'lokamavati shirayim letivla. So l'chayra, it should not be able to be mavatal. So mani. So who is this like? That says it does work. Irabanan ha'amri oilin hu deloy mavatal hadadi. Only things that are already on the mizbeach are not mavatal. However, these shirayim, which are not on the mizbeach, hamin b'minoi batal. So they'll hold that min b'mino is batal. These shirayim could be mavatal one another, right? So therefore, if they're mavatal one another, then it becomes problematic, right? El b'shit Rabbi Yehuda. Now bishlom el mandiyam rabasa batal azlinan. I can understand the one who says that you go basar batal. Again, the case of basar batal is the case of the nevela, right? The nevela, because the nevela could become shchuta, right? So too, if that's how he looks at it, then havi kimavatal. Delachi kamitz meidach havi hu shirayim, because once you do the kamitza with the other one, then it becomes shirayim. So kamitza the rest could turn into shirayim, right? So kihani. The one who says we go muslim avatal, namely we look at the two pieces of shchuta. Since a shchuta cannot become a nevela, so therefore that's the reason why they're two separate things. So shirayim mika havi tivla. So how it can't happen that direction. So lema the look Rav Chia. So it must be that our mission is not like Rav Chia. No hasam can Rav Zera. The Rav Zera never haktara b'kaimitz and never haktara b'shirayim. It says Haktar by the Kmitza and by the Shirayim. Why does it mention it by both? So Ma Haktar, especially we don't do Haktar on the Shirayim. So Ma Haktar Hamur B'Kaimitz Ena Kaimitz Mavatos Eskavedoi. It's just coming to teach us this interesting din. That when it comes to Kmitza, if you have two of them mixed together, they're not Mavatal each other. Af Haktar Hamur B'Shirayim in Shirayim Mavatin Esakaimitz. So the din is just not Mavatal one another. Okay. Tashma. Hakaimitz Shinisar b'mincha shlonik mitzah. So again, now we're looking at the next part of our Mishnah, where they're not on the same playing field, where one you already did kmitza, lo yakter, because there's an issue of bal taktiru, because there's some of it which you did kmitza, some of you didn't do kmitza. Navim hiktiru zushanik mitzah also labalim. It works for at least the kmitza that was already done, and then you did the haktara. We'll say it was for that. Mizushal nik mitzah also labalim. V'lo kamavatal tivla l'kaimitz. We don't say it's mavatal. So mani he irabanan hoyamri oilin hudaloi mavatal hadadi. What's not mavatal? What does not can't cause the other one to be absorbed and not exist? That's only when it comes to oilin. Ha min bamino bottle. He says that when there's min bamino, it is bottle. The visual mountain mavatal aslinan mavatal havi ke bottle. The whole port chazila mikmatz mine. Every piece of that flour is shaykh to become a kmitza, right? So this flour could become a kaimitz. V'havli min b'minoi umin b'minoi bottle, and that's the reason they're not mavatal one another, and that's why it works. Says Rashi, "Ein kaimitz mavatal es chaver dehafilu rehuda moeded lo pligu rehuda b'mastis arav kumtzu b'kaimitz chaverta." El madir b'basar bottle aslinan. Again, according to the shita that we go basar bottle, right? Here it's actually the kashas the other way around, right? It's basar bottle. That case of the shchuta, the two shchuta and the one nevela, that the nevela could become a shchuta, and therefore it's considered to be min b'minoi. It's not going to be bottle in that situation. So if that's the case, basar bottle aslin and kaimitz mika havi tivla, right? It cannot become tevel. It's like already taken off. So leimadol kravchia. So hamani could have zera. So again, it's like the shita Rav Zera that teaches us this din, the fact that these psukim are written in this way. It says hakadaira by both tell you that the din is they're not mavatal. It's a special din, especially by mincha. Tashman this arav kumsa b'shirayim shel chaverto yaktivim hikter also labalim. So here's the final last case of our Mishnah. Navahacha doli havim mavatal kemavatal. V'lo kemavatal le shirayim l'kaimitz. It's not mavatal the shirayim and not mavatal the kaimitz. So mani ira banan v'chulu. So Rav Zera never haktar because the never haktar b'shirayim haktar hamur b'kaimitz ein kaimitz mavatal chaveroi av haktar hamur b'shirayim in shirayim mavatal kaimitz. So it's basically we just reiterate the same thing. So we see this in all three aspects of our Mishnah. Okay, so Tashma Tivla, and I think we finally are going to get a question over here. This is going to eventually be question TB5. So let me just mark this down quickly. Let's see if I answered it right. So Tivla b'katzach. So let's say you have this matzah, but it's not regular matzah. It's as Rashi says, it's Isas Pesach. It is a dough, right? But it is a spiced up dough. And you use katzach, which is some type of like a fennel spice or something like that. So we're going to end up seeing in the Havamina that the matzah will be the minority, and the maskana is going to be that there's more matzah, so it's going to be the majority. So, bishum shimin, and let's say you have sesame, the spices, shera. Matzahi, it's considered to be matzah. El shenikras matzah metuvlas. It's given this status. So apparently it's fine, even though there's matzah and there's these spices. Now, so it's still considered to be matzah, right? So the afish la tavon tveima matzah. You have a lot of spices, which is an interesting havamina. There's more of these spices and additives than the matzah itself. So the matzah is the minority, and we're going to see that the matzah is mavatal the roiv. Now, bishlam lo mandiemer basar batal azlinan. Now, again, as we said before, when it come to the case of the shchut and the veil, just so we should hold cup, right? We had 2 shchuta pieces and 1 nevela piece. So if you say basar batal azlinan, in that case, that was going after the nevela, and since a nevela could become a shchuta, so therefore we said, since the nevela could, if it rots, it could become like the din of a shchuta, so therefore it's min b'mino, and it's not batal. So if you hold basar batal azlinan, batal havi kimavatal, so it could become mavatal dolchi ma'afsha, because if it spoils, havile ketavlin. So the matzah could take upon itself like the same status as the tavlin. So it makes sense that matzah can have the same din as the tavlin, because it may lose its sense of matzah. Elamandi ermer basar mavatal azlinan. Again, we're talking about the matzah is the majority, just like over here the mavatal is the 2 pieces of shchuta, which is the majority pieces, and therefore, but in the case of the shchuta cannot become an avela, and therefore, because shchuta cannot become an avela, we said it's not min b'minoi. So maybe the same thing. If we say in that case that the majority is the tavlin, so tavlin mika havim matzah, it can't become matzah, right? So in that case, it's not the same thing as so it's the same thing as 2 pieces of shchuta cannot become nevela, and therefore it's not min b'mina. It's not min b'minai, and therefore it should be batal. So that's the kasha. Says Rashi, kloimer yotzim etaris matzah b'tavlin. Right? It should no longer have the status of matzah. So hakmai skina and doli afish le tavlin. There wasn't a lot of spices. The ruba matzahi. Actually, the majority is the matzah, not the majority is the spices. Vo batla, and it's not batal. Dekanami, I'll prove it to you. Dektani matzahi. It's called matzah. El shenikros matzah mituvlas shmamina, which is clear that there's roiv matzah. Okay, we're going to stop there. Look at question TB 5. Matzah shetivla batavlin. V'rabba hatavlin. There's a lot of spices. Al matzah ikaman dermer de hamatzah kshera. Madua ein hamatzah misbateles betavlin. And it says over here, be'er hatam bazeh. So let's see what I wrote. Yesh ma'chokas im holach acher habitol o hamavatal. Okay, so that's good so far. Raki matzah maruba shikarin oiso matzah. It's still called matzah b'maskana. Sheish matzah maruba. So since there's a lot of matzah, so therefore that's even according to the shita of basar mavatal azlinan, right? So over here, but what is the majority? The majority is not the tavlin. The matzah is the majority. Of oloi im hamatzah haya hamiyut. At least according to one mandaimer. I would say that's a pretty decent answer. Adkan.